Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. It's great to have you here, and we're looking forward to being able to chat with our guest today, Laurel. What has Laurel learnt? What has she found? What's she doing now? Well, let's bring our guest on, and we'll be able to find out some of those questions. Good morning, Laurel. Oh man,
Hi.
no, it's not. It's afternoon where you are, isn't it?
Yeah, well, good morning to you, Shane. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great privilege to be able to have you on. So let's get straight into it. How
Yep.
did you get involved in the J Dubs? What's a little bit of your story there?
Yeah, so before I get into my story, I just wanted to give a big hug to everyone here. And just that
Yeah.
feeling of I'm just so grateful to be here. I'm grateful that there's this community and a place where people can talk and heal. So yeah, I just want to start sending you all a big hug. Everyone who's here right now. You're not alone. You're certainly not alone, no matter where you're at in your
Mm,
journey.
yeah.
So yeah, so I was born into the Witnesses, although I was fortunate enough that my parents got together in the 70s and they weren't quite as strict at that time, at least in the congregation
Hmm.
where my mom was. So my dad was never a witness. So that I feel very fortunate for that. But I
Mm,
was raised in the community with my mom and my mom's side of the family. And at a certain point, um, when I was young, I mean, I'm trying to think of how old I was when this happened, but my mom got disfellowshipped actually, but I stayed a witness. I stayed in the community because it was, I was already so deeply ingrained. I was already part
mm,
of the community. And I was very close to my grandmother and my aunts. And at that time, my grandmother arranged for me to have another family study with me and
mhm.
become like my spiritual family, my spiritual, um, that. And so I got into this weird position where a lot of other people, people would say, well, they would say to their children, well, look at Laurel. She's doing it on her own now. Like her mom got disfellowship and, she's still doing it. And so I felt this pressure in that way. And, I did believe really passionately too, which was a really
Mm,
hard part of, you know, f- a hard part of the whole journey was
yep.
how invested I was in the faith, how much I believed it. And also it was a source of support for me and
Mm,
stability because my family life continued to be quite like rocky and unstable, after my parents divorced. And, um, you know, so there was just a lot going on. And that was kind of my rock, so even after my mom left, I stuck with it. And
yep.
yeah, and I stayed with it until like many people, you start having the questions that come up, the conflicts of just reality, really,
Yep.
interfacing with the doctrine, and from whether it was like just wanting to explore worldly things a little bit more, having that tension, which is really common, to other quite profound things where I was really, having some just theological questions and definitely questions about the organization. Um, and so that's it. So I went through a period, my late teens into my early 20s, of that whole kind of starting to get in
Yep.
trouble,
Yep.
all the start, the elders visits, and then but then like, and then, the kind of yo-yoing that I think a lot of
Yeah.
us do. So it
Mm,
really was a couple of years of yo-yoing. And I don't think I was like, I didn't, I think I went to my last meeting and, had my last official contact when I was like 20 or so. Um, so yeah, and that's been 20 years.
wow. So, if you were to compare when you were in when you were 20 and you were last contact to where you are now, how are you feeling?
So good. Like a world of difference. And
Yeah.
like leaving for me, like it is for most people,
Yeah.
it's like you just don't know what to do. Like you've never learned
Yeah.
how to hang out
Yeah.
with people normally. Like how do you go to a party with worldly people, or how do you make friends out of the context of the Witnesses, like, and also just this sadness of, a lot of what kept me in there even as long as it did was the relationships and like all the
Yeah.
people that and love and care for. And just, like I said, I was so fortunate that my dad never became a witness. And
Yep.
I'm fortunate also that my mom got disfellowshipped before me, because it meant that I didn't even, many of you out there have lost your parents in this, or
Mm.
have that gulf in that relationship. And so because of how, how it happened in my family, I didn't have that, at least the parental loss factor. I
Yeah.
lost my
Yep.
mom, like when she got disfellowshipped and I was still in the, a witness, and people were like, well, when you get married, your mom's not going to be able to be there. And
Hmm.
the whole like
Yeah.
wedge, I suffered on the other side of the wedge, my poor mom, like, but at least when I got on the other side of it, I didn't have that to deal with. But it was still like just the rest of the family and the whole community and the friendships and just
Yep.
everything, So, um, so that was, I I'm glad that I didn't bottom out as hard as a lot of people I know
Hmm.
did, but I
Yep.
definitely, a lot of drinking for me, that was one of my coping strategies. There was not like internet, like there weren't internet support groups around at that time in the way that there are now. And,
Yeah.
I did have one friend, thankfully, who left at around the same time that I was able to stay in touch with, and, who's still a friend to this day. I'm
Great.
grateful for that bridge. But yeah, it just like severe depression, like, and quite a long time. I don't even know. It's hard to pinpoint, when you move out of that phase and into another phase. But for me, I really tried to turn my back on it, tried to pretend like it didn't have the influence on me that it had, tried to pretend that it didn't impact me
Mm.
the way that it had. And, so it took me a couple of years before I think I could even say, okay, this did happen to me. It majorly messed with my life. And it majorly messed with my life, and insofar as the decisions I made even up to that point, like
Yep.
about going to university or not going to university, or all of these things that, especially at that time, in the 90s, going into the 2000s. I know that they changed the policies all the time, but at that time it was still kind of a no to go to university. It was still,
Yep.
like all these things, and that, all these things that kind of impact the course of your life. um that, yeah, a funny thing actually, like, yeah, anyways, that's a lot. But that's it. That's my background, and I had a hard time, definitely had a hard time leaving. So if any of you are in that spot, that raw spot of just losing people and feeling that pain, I really sympathize with you. And
Mm.
but I'm living proof though that, like, one day you'll look back and you won't be able to imagine why any of those people had power over you, or why
Yeah.
any of those relationships mattered as much as they do. Or, even if you still have love for them, it's, that you can definitely get to a different space.
Yep. Absolutely. So, looking back on your journey, so you left. You mentioned briefly some of the things you went through. What
Mhm,
did you find the most help back
mhm,
then to start? Okay, so you had your parents out.
mhm,
What did you find was the most or beneficial help that you received
mhm,
to encourage you to keep going forward?
mhm. It's a really good question. Um, I think what helped me the most was opening up and allowing myself to start following my passions, and allowing me to start following the things that I had closed myself in from. That was
Yep.
being a witness is just like, it's everything is no, everything around you is no.
Yep.
And just beginning to say yes, and starting to say yes, in yes to the healthier things, too.
Yep.
Like, I think at first for a lot of us there's a yes to unhealthier things, just because of all the guilt and the whatever, that, or it's just like the most obvious things, or, so like drinking too much or doing whatever, partying, or whatever it might be, but just like, but for me it was opening the door to the positive yeses. So being able to just even like enjoy interesting movies, or like,
Okay. Yeah.
enjoy books or thing, like just starting to open up to art and culture in a way that had been so confined and defined for me. That I found very useful and helpful. Um, like for me, like music and art just kind of became a therapy. And
Mm.
and I think it took me a while. It took me a while to learn how to make friends, like
Okay.
who weren't witnesses. It's not that I didn't, like socially, but to like get into like deeper relationships with people,
Yeah. Yeah.
and because you kind of start with nothing because you're not allowed to have
That's
friends
right.
that aren't witnesses, and then you're in that interim zone, and that's tough. But I think first, just like opening up to relationships with non-witnesses and um, learning how to be a good friend to other people and learning to allow other people into my life too. That was also very therapeutic and very healing and getting that support. So I think it's like, yeah, it's like saying yes, finally learning to say yes to yourself and opening up that door. And of course, like I didn't do therapy. I wish I would have done therapy back then. I
Yeah.
didn't, but like about 12 years ago, I started going to therapy, and that I wished I would have done right out of the gates. That's been really, really helpful. I was lucky to find someone right away who I really liked, who was really helpful
Great.
to me. And so that also was a big thing. And I would encourage anyone out there, if you can access it in some
Yep.
way, to get therapy. There are a lot more ways now of getting connected with that, and
Yep.
it's super helpful. And I think I was afraid of going to therapy in this weird way for a while. I
Yeah.
was afraid I would be
Yep.
overwhelmed, or I was afraid they wouldn't understand the Jehovah Witnessing. I was afraid they wouldn't
Hmm.
understand all the complex things in my life and the history in the past. I was afraid that if I would open stuff up, I wouldn't be able to take it, and or I'd like break down or something. And just the opposite happened. I realized I was carrying this big weight, and then just
Yeah.
opening myself up to help. And
Yep.
then I wasn't afraid of it anymore.
Great. Now, you mentioned a couple of things while you were talking there, one being the friends and music and culture. Can I just ask, you said you found it really, really hard, and that's not uncommon.
Mhm,
What were some of the practical things that you could enlarge on to tell us how you went about that and
mhm.
really what helped the most?
So I think, again, that thing about saying yes finally
Yeah.
to whatever your interests are. Um, so like I said, for me, that was opening up a lot to music or to art, and just through allowing myself to engage with those interests,
Oh, yep.
those
Yep.
passions,
Yep.
that's where I started to kind of meet people and connect with people on a shared kind of basis. So I think
Yes.
really just whatever whatever you're, and even like if now even Shane, like you've got this passionate part of your life about like moving on from Jehovah's
Yep.
Witnesses, and through here
Yep.
you're finding community and people, and I think, like I said, when I left, there weren't these online groups, but I can certainly
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that, like, since leaving, it is a thing. If you meet another ex Jehovah's Witness anywhere, it doesn't matter if you listen to the same music or not, or like the same books, or like that's just a thing that you have this bond, and that there are things ab- about your lives that might be
Yep.
difficult to explain to other people. And so
Yep.
I actually think this is, the few ex Jehovah's Witnesses that I've met as well throughout the years too. I've made friends with a couple, that those relationships have been really, really great and really important too. So I think, yeah, like opening up to the community of ex Jehovah's Witnesses is like a big place to start,
Yes.
so people can understand what you're going through, and then widening out from that, just
Yeah.
really let yourself open the door to whatever you're interested in.
Yeah. So it's obvious that music and culture became one of your passions, or you might
Mhm.
have already had that passion before, but it grew. What did that lead to?
Yeah, so for me, it took me it took me like a decade after leaving the
Okay.
Witnesses to
Yeah.
feel that I had gotten my life together enough, and
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
I think to even just, this is a hard thing again, it's harder to explain to people who haven't been Jehovah's
Yes.
Witnesses, but just to like, I had this great fear of judgment being public, which, you know, a lot of people have, but it's the witnesses kind of can really make that a different, more
Yeah.
visceral thing for you. And so that was, you know, I just, even though I had left the witnesses, I was still keeping myself closed, you know, and kind of like in a container a bit, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I spent most of my 20s just surviving, figuring
Hmm.
it out, you know, trying to rebuild parts of my life, like try to re-navigate my career even, or things like that, because the witnesses had kind of, you know, taken a hard, you know, turn, had me have a hard turn in another direction. So, you know, trying to figure out, okay, what is it that I want to do now that I can do what I want to do? How do I do that? You know, just kind of building up more of a normal life. And then, you know, I reached the end of my also part of that, I grew up in the States, and I moved to Montreal
Okay.
with a boyfriend when I was 21, I guess.
Yep.
And so that also kind of, you know, it's like I moved to a different country. I had to work with work visas, just kind of figure things out, figure my life out, and kind of get settled in
Yeah.
a new
Yeah.
place. But it also felt important for me to move too, and just get somewhere else where I wouldn't be running into people who couldn't talk to me at the grocery store. And you know, that whole thing when you're in
Yeah.
it's like, even if the witnesses are only a small percentage of the population that you live in,
Yes.
it's, you know, it still sucks to like have that pop up in your face where you are. So for me, I was just like, I want to get somewhere far away. But yeah, so I didn't really allow myself to step publicly into music. I did a couple things in a little group in my mid-20s, but it was
Hmm.
really like my late 20s, almost when I was 30, that I started this project called Little Scream, which is my current music project. I
Yeah.
do things with a lot of other people too, but yeah, and Little Scream to me was like, it was just literally like that scream that I had been holding
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
whole life, you know. And you know, the witnesses held me back from that, but then I was holding myself back because of that,
Yep.
you know, that background. And I just felt like, oh, if I don't do this now, like, you know, I don't want to have that as another regret, you know, moving forward. I want to just be able to feel like I've tried and gotten out
Okay.
there.
Yep.
And so yeah, so I started Little Scream, and I've Little Scream opened the door. You know, I haven't become like hugely successful, but I've had a hugely successful personal life because of it, you know? Like I've been able to travel the world, tour the world, playing music for people, meeting incredible people. I have an awesome community of artists now around me. You know, I get to collaborate with amazing people on really cool projects. And it's like
Cool.
a life I couldn't have dreamed about before, and couldn't have allowed myself to dream of, I think, frankly. And I think it's a dream that I was so close to almost not doing, because I allowed that feeling of failure to
Yes.
accumulate, because I
Yes.
didn't try, and because of all the time that I lost being a witness, you know.
Yep.
And that there's a weight to that. And I'm just so thankful that I just, you know, decided to, and I had some friends, some close friends who were, you know, just encouraged me, and they just said, Laurel, listen, like, just do this. What do you have to lose, you know? And yeah, and so I have, and so and yeah, I'll never look back. I think I still 10 years now into this music career. I think I still struggle with some like witness stuff, in terms of, you know,
Yes.
like saying, we were just starting to, like, one of the ways that I notice it, and Shane and I were kind of talking about this before we went live a bit, but I find that my relationship to social media has definitely been impacted by my
Mm,
witness background, in terms of like, I just have this natural kind of fear of exposure. And, you
yep.
know, it's a little bit harder for me. I think it maybe too, I'm, you know, I'm like a generation a bit behind, you know, I didn't, like, social media wasn't as much present when I was young. So that's part of it too. But another big part of it is like, which is something I've worked out with a therapist, but you know, or talked about at least. But it's just that kind of fear of being criticized because of
Yeah.
something you're saying
Yeah.
wrong, you're doing wrong, whatever it is. And so, you know, that certainly hasn't helped my music career, but thankfully I've still been able to do what I've done without, like, you know, being very good on Instagram or Facebook.
Yeah. I don't have Instagram. I find it hard with all the different platforms that are out there to be able to do the different things.
Yep. Yep.
So you said that you've had a lot of fun traveling around the world. Can you think of a couple of things that stand out to you that you've really enjoyed while you've been traveling around and singing?
Yeah. Yeah. There are so many. I mean, just the fact that I've been able to do that in the first place, like it, so I've been able to tour North America a few times, like a number of times, and then I guess touring touring in Europe. One of my favorite Europe touring experiences was this festival called it's like a festival for women's music, and each year it's called Voces Femininas, and
Mm-hmm.
they each year they just pick 3 women and do this like mini festival tour with them.
Yep.
So in our case, it was Lisa Hannigan, who's this phenomenal Irish singer. She's a genius, and then Holly Miranda and I, and we just I don't know, just getting taken around Spain, playing shows for people in these beautiful theaters, and getting taken around by these like hosts, who run a festival, and hanging out with artists and playing, and just it's like I don't know, it's just kind of a dream come true to just be able to see the world and experience it that way, and travel, So anyways, I yeah, I that's it. I'm just seeing someone, a Facebook user, saying, commenting about not being hugely successful publicly, just being successful in a personal life. And yeah, that's I stand by that. I stand by that, no matter how many Facebook likes or this or that likes I got. I just
Yep.
feel like, man, I'm not saying my life doesn't have ups and downs now, but just I'm happy, and I'm just happy in a way that's like where I'm able to embrace all of who I am
Yeah.
and say yes to
Yeah.
all of who I am, with my imperfections and my, the things I like and don't, and I don't know, just being able to say yes, and like that's what I wish for everyone here, to be able to say yes to every part of yourself, finally, and whether it's a hard thing to deal with or
Mm-hmm.
something that you want to embrace, just that is like there's a different kind of happiness that comes from that, and it's not the like put on happiness where you're always kind of having to push a part down of yourself to be happy.
Totally understand that.
Yeah. Um, so so yeah, I'm trying to think. There are just so many great, I've been able to sing with like members of like, I guess like more famous bands or musicians, or, and I don't even know, like I know you have an international audience, so I feel like, I could name people who are like a really big deal, over here, and people wouldn't know, and it kind of doesn't matter at the end of the day, but I've been able to meet so many of my like musical idols, I've been able to like just be in this vibrant artistic community, and that to me
Yep.
is just something I couldn't have imagined for myself before, and you know and so yeah, that is, I think, also like I'm living proof that like, it took me a decade at least before I could
Yes.
even start to open that door. So like you can't rush yourself, you can't be hard on yourself, if you think, oh, I'm still struggling with this, or I'm still not over this, or whatever, if it's been
Yep.
a year or 5 years or 10 or 20, whatever it is, like it's it's that happiness, and that just more full experience of yourself is just something you can continue to
Yeah.
move into.
Absolutely.
Mhm,
And all this has happened because you've said that three-letter word. Yes.
mhm, mhm.
Were there times when you went, yes, nah, oh, but yes?
It's funny, like, after I've talked with some of my other friends who are ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, it seems like for other people I know have struggled a little bit more with thinking the witnesses were right. Like, or having those moments of like, maybe I wanna go back or something,
Yep. Yep.
I see you there. It took you more than 10 years. I'm just
Mm.
I see you. I feel that. Um, so maybe in the first year, I had more of the, like, am I right? Are they right? Who's right? But
Yes. Yep.
for me, at least, that part of I had like I this is a place where like I know we all have a lot of sensitivity around like relationships with like
Hmm.
praying or different things like that after we leave, and so I don't want to like trigger anyone there. But I think like I for me it was important for me to reopen a channel of communication with the divine, the source,
Okay.
with God, with
Yep.
whatever you want to call it. For me, that was important so that I could feel like okay, just wait a second here. Like I can never go back there. I can never go back there because I know that this feeling, that feeling of the divine or whatever, is bigger than this
Hmm.
little organization, you know? No matter how much power it had over me or how much so much of my life seemed to reinforce that that was the truth or reality, like
Yeah.
I was able to what once I distanced myself from it and distanced myself enough from the people, then I never, for me at least, there was not a looking back, you know, as that
Okay.
being an option. For me, it was more an option of like, okay, if I want to reconnect to that idea of God again or something like that, I got to find another way. I have to find another path. I have to reclaim that part of myself because it's been
Yep.
colonized, you know, and I'm going to figure out my own way of doing that. And that was my journey more. But, you know, but I do have friends who you know, once I was fully out, I was out. But there was that couple year, I would say probably 3 years where it was kind of like, oh, I don't know. Okay, am I in? Am I out? Am I in? Am I out? Am I, you know, but once I was out, it was, you know,
Oh.
thankfully at least I didn't have I wasn't called back to that space at all. And I am grateful for that because I know, you know, like I said, and I'm sure you know other people too who, you
Mm.
know, spent years being disfellowshipped, then coming back, then being disfellowshipped again, and then, you know, just that kind of thing. But, you know, whatever your journey is and however long it takes you, you know, to free yourself, that's, you know, we all have different paths with respect to that and different relationships to, you know, family and things like that in the organization too, which
Yeah.
complicates. So,
Well, that's good.
yeah.
It's nice to see you didn't look back.
Once I was finally out, yeah,
Yep.
didn't didn't and I'm grateful for it.
Great.
Mhm.
And we're so grateful that you've been able to keep on that, on your journey to go where you want to go.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you talked briefly about your musician. Are you still doing that now?
I am, I haven't put out an album. I put out an album kinda right before the pandemic, um,
Okay. Yeah.
and I you know, I played a music festival in February of 2020, and then, you know, everything shut down, but
Yes.
it was a nice break for me actually to not be on the road, and,
Okay.
I'm actually working on, like, a piece I'm working on some new music, but
Nice.
I'm also working on other projects, like, my husband and I are in he's in a band called Arcade Fire, but
Yep.
he and I are, we're in a project, it's, like, more his project that's a kind of, like, psychedelic folk project called Quiet River
Okay.
West. So
Yep.
we're working on a new double album for that, which is, you know, that's also a healing therapeutic space there.
Great.
And yeah, I'm working on something now that again, I don't want to trigger anybody, but one thing that, you know, when you grow up with the fear of apocalypse and then
Yes.
you find yourself in a world that feels apocalyptic,
Yep.
I think that we are strangely suited to being able to cope with these stresses and pressures. Like either we get really triggered and it's too hard for us and we go one way, but
Yeah. Yep.
if we accept it, if we actually accept the experience that we've had and say,
Hmm.
"Hey, you guys are newbies thinking about things being difficult in the world with the environment or whatever," and like we've been thinking about this our whole lives. So
Yeah.
it is like it's a project that I'm working on. It'll probably take me another, you know, 2 years at least probably to get it together and get it out there. But something that kind of speaks to like facing the current challenges of the world with this like experience of growing up with apocalyptic stress. And I'm like channeling that into some music and kind of like essay sort of writing
Cool.
things.
Yep.
So it's a
Great.
little harder to describe, but I do feel like it's an important, I feel like we have a unique perspective, we ex Jehovah's Witnesses, in terms of dealing with that kind of, you know, apocalyptic thinking, apocalyptic
Yeah.
stress, and all of that, you know, not any clearer. It doesn't tell us what to do with it, but it's just, you know, it's a real experience in terms of growing up that way. So it's part of
Cool.
what I'm working on right now.
Great. So what was your let's give a bit of a plug to your record. What do we call them nowadays? Not
Yeah,
records.
record. You can call them
Oh,
records.
okay.
I
All
still,
right, that's fine.
I still make them as records. Yeah, like I still
Yeah.
have vinyl records actually.
Yeah, they seem to be making a bit of a comeback nowadays.
Mhm.
So what's your album called?
So the last album that I put out was called Speed Queen, and it's actually it's my third record, third album. It came out on a
Right.
label called Merge in the US.
Yep.
And like I said, it was like fall of 2019, so pretty close to before the pandemic. So I didn't really get to tour it. And if you haven't heard much about it, it's just like many of us artists, like anything you put out around that time, just kind of, you know, had a different path. But it's a
Yeah.
great record. I stand behind it. And it's a
Good.
lot like it was written after many years of like touring, especially in the US, and kind of
Okay.
observing a lot of economic decline. And, you know, and I came from a very working class background too, you
Yep.
know,
Yep.
so the songs are, it's more political, I would say, than anything I've written in the
Oh,
past,
okay.
but it's
Yeah. Yeah.
also easy listening. I wanted to make it like easy kind of like fun, summary kind of feeling, but with like content in it that was, you know, talking about the struggle that I was seeing people face. And
So
that's
is that? Oh, sorry, Karen.
oh yeah, no, that's it. So that's the
Okay.
last record I had that came out, Speed Queen.
No, that's cool. So is it under your name, or have you got a stage presence name, or
Yeah, so it's under Little Scream. So
Little Scream? Okay.
little scream, like yell. A lot of times people hear
Yeah.
stream like a river, and it's like, no, it's a scream. So Little Scream is my stage name. So you can
Okay.
find it
Cool.
all, you know, like on Facebook as Little Scream, or, you know, there should be links. I have to check. I
Cool.
haven't updated my Facebook for a bit, but I can. But anyways, yeah, so you can find it. You can find it there, and I'm on, you know, Apple, Spotify, all the Apple Music, any of those places you can
Yeah.
find
All
stuff.
good live streams come from. No,
Exactly.
well, whatever the saying
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Exactly. All
uh,
the streaming places. So,
yeah.
so yeah, so that you can find it there. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that, and then the other project that I'm in is Quiet River of Dust. Like I said, the one I'm in with my husband. And that's quite like, it's a bit more like meditative, I think, kind of healing kind
Okay.
of music, I would say. So maybe that's one to check out if anyone's interested.
What we'll do is I'll get some links off you later, and then we'll
Great.
put them in the description and things like that. So if people
Okay.
want to reach out and listen to your music,
Yeah.
they'll be
Great.
able to. So you mentioned your husband. Can I ask how you two met?
Yeah. So when I first moved to Montreal, um, I ended up, yeah, we met through friends. We met through friends is the
Okay.
short answer. And I was dating someone else for quite a long time. I mean, I'm definitely like kind of my Jehovah Witness past shows up, and that I'm kind of a long termer. You know, like I
Yes.
never figured out the casual dating thing, sort of.
Yeah.
So I kind of went straight from the person that I was with when I left the Witnesses. He and I were together for just over 10 years. And then,
Right.
but I met Richard, who's my current partner and husband now, actually. But I met Richard, and I met years before we got together, but just through, you know, we just had mutual friends.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and like actually who became my best friend, there's a picture of her in the pictures that are there. But anyways, her name is Shannon Walsh, and she's definitely someone who helped me a lot on my post-witness journey. She's like the
Hmm.
first best girlfriend that I made after leaving the Witnesses, because for a while it was hard for me I lost so many all of my close girlfriends, you know, my closest friends, when I left the Witnesses, and I just was in so much pain that it was hard for me to get close to
Yep.
a friend again in that way. Like I made male friends, or it was kind of like more acquaintances, but like Shannon was the first best friend that I met post Witnesses. And anyway, Shannon was married to someone who was in another band with Richard. So that's how I met Richard through Shannon. And then yeah, that's it. That's Shannon.
It's
Um,
Shannon.
yeah, she's a filmmaker, and
Oh, okay.
And she had a dysfunctional upbringing, and for whatever reason, the dysfunction like mirrored enough of my Jehovah Witness kind of pain, in
Yes.
terms of
Yep.
like alienation and just different things like that. And she and I actually worked for many years on a script together that was based on, we were always like, oh man, what if we had met when we were teenagers? Like when you were
Okay.
messed up
Yeah.
with your life and I was still a Jehovah's Witness. So we wrote a film script. It actually won a couple of awards at different
Oh, did
little
it?
festivals as a script. But it's, I don't know if it'll ever get made into a feature length because it's so crazy expensive and hard to get films made.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a whole other thing. But Shannon and I spent years working on a script about a Jehovah's Witness, a girl trying to get out of a teenage Jehovah's Witness girl, kind of starting to lead a double life and being really
Okay.
caught
Yep.
in that. And, I have to say, for anyone who's out there right now, like, like Mormons have had their time. They've got a musical on Broadway. Like,
Yeah.
I just feel like every other religious group or organization has kind of had their due. And like Jehovah's Witnesses, there's still this like secrecy around it. There's still like, where's our TV shows that talk about our experience? Where's our films? Where's our, like,
Yeah.
there are stories that need to be written. There are, and for whatever reason, for multiple reasons, our stories haven't really been told yet. So I just, I want to put that out there too, that I think the stories still need to be told.
They do. Yeah, I think the one that's doing the rounds at the moment, guy Scott Holman, he's winning quite a few awards for his underground witness. He's just won a couple of awards through the festivals.
Okay. I haven't seen that yet,
Um,
actually.
yeah, no, the only way you can watch it, if they don't geo-lock it, like I
Uh,
can't watch it here in New Zealand,
right.
is by going on to, and we'll also put Scott's information down below, but he's just won a couple of awards for his production.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few other things that are going on around the traps at the moment, and hopefully they'll come and be completed as well. Even the
Mm-hmm.
guy Shane DeShane that we had on, no, not Shane DeShane, Tony DeShane,
Okay.
Jesus, Confession of a Jesus Jerk.
Mm.
He's also got things in the wind as well at the moment to be able to make a further series or another full feature length.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things going on, but you're right,
Yeah.
not too much, apart from a few documentaries that are happening
Mm-hmm.
around the world.
Yeah.
So maybe you could start that.
Start there?
Yeah, you could start that.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
we should get some people in behind you and
Yeah.
get it going.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Shannon and I were talking about it recently, and I think, I think it maybe we'll rewrite it or something, but it's
Okay.
like, as soon as there's something that's like, if it comes time to be like something that we could produce, then, I'll reach out. Like I said, like there needs to be some good, there needs to be some more like more depictions of it, more
Yeah.
just more expression of what this experience is like. And I think it's so complicated to describe, how it impacts you, to people who haven't been in it, that I think that that's also part of what the, the hesitation is. And also like, witnesses can kind of look like
Yeah.
anybody else. We don't have the Mormons wear weird underwear and do all these other things that are a little bit more like, you know, like
Yep.
easier to point out as funny or exceptional or something, and it can be harder to make clear to people on the outside, what makes it so particular being a witness, so
So do you think it should be humorous or more of a documentary thing like apostasy or something like that?
I think all of it, but I feel like I feel like I feel like both are really important. I think,
Okay.
more documentaries can and should be made because there's a lot that needs to be,
Yeah.
uncovered and just shown. But then I think also, like, it's harder to find humor. It takes a lot of work to
Yeah.
take a painful experience and make it into something where you can show the pain but not make people feel terrible, watching it, like where you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
can let them laugh, if like people, I think, it's when any of us are watching a kind of comedy about a difficult subject, someone or many people had to really work really worked
Mm,
to translate that into something that could
yeah, yeah,
be where you could get the message and have a laugh at the same time. So
yeah.
I would love to see something like the thing that Shannon and I were working on had some comedy and some drama in it, like kind of a teen kind of thing. Um, and I just feel like, yeah, that's really what needs to be out there is a comedy. I think like one, yeah, anyways, there are definitely some comedic scenes that I feel like even if we don't make this film, I want to bring them into something, in the future. So
Well,
yeah.
we'll watch this space. If
Yeah.
anybody wants to reach out and support you with that, would you welcome that?
Absolutely. I mean, right now, like I said, we don't have any plans for this
Yep,
particular one, but I mean, just reaching out and saying hello. As Shane knows, I'm not like on Facebook all the time, so sometimes it'll take me a while to get back to people. So don't take it personally if anyone reaches out and I don't respond right away. Part like I was saying, like just for my own mental health, and also
absolutely.
I just love being busy and working on the things that I do. So I kind of keep my internet or my Facebook or social media time, it's a bit more limited than I think some people's. But if anyone would like to reach out, even just with questions or you know, I'm happy to help in any way I can too.
Yeah. Yeah, for those ones in our Life After Facebook group, Laurel is part of our group, and we will tag her in the post. So if you want to reach out, by all
Mhm.
means, you've seen the invitation,
Yeah,
or I
you can
should
find
say,
me
yeah.
here. Yeah,
All right. So by all means, reach out.
yeah.
Now, just going back, you mentioned briefly on the social media side of things. Can you enlarge a little bit more on that? You mentioned about your mental health
Hmm.
and limiting the amount of time that you spend on there.
Hmm.
Is there anything else that you could add? Some people seem to be stuck on it. They don't seem to want to let it. It's almost like they've got a cyborg thing on the side of their head, and I've got to look at this, and
Yeah,
and they just don't get on with real life.
yeah, yeah. And I think that maybe is a it's one of I mean, you can have a real life on social media too, weirdly
Yep.
enough. Being this is also an extension of your life. And if this is where you have found your support and your connection, by all means, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just have found that for myself, because of my like kind of that fear of exposure that I post less, it's less natural for me to share and post. Like it's natural for
Yeah.
me to share
Yeah.
in conversation, but I have never found that kind of flow or freedom that I think some people have found in terms of communicating on through social media. And
Yep.
then also for me too, I just find that there's just such a culture of comparison on social media. And
Yes.
that they've done all these studies where teenage girls in particular are that Instagram makes them depressed. Like that
Yeah.
just there are these like kind of shockingly high increases in depression. And it's kind of like a where there's a perform there can be what I like about kind of closed groups like this, there's more realness. I,
Yep.
I find, there's less of a need to perform and show like I'm doing great. Look how awesome I look in this
Yep.
photo or this or that thing. Um, but I find that like the I am happier the more time I spend just like my music is my therapy, and I paint as well, and my art is my
Oh,
therapy.
okay. Yep.
And those are like the things that I'm the happiest when I'm actually doing those things, and then the more time that I find comes into social media or things like that, where I'm maybe reading about it or looking at pictures of people doing things, I just am like less
Yeah.
happy. And also I'm not a good multitasker. And
Okay.
like I'm a person that like I kind of like just having one thing in front of me or one person in front of me that I'm talking to or and so I think maybe it's just a little bit harder for me to yeah, like
Yep.
the way that I feel like, if anyone reaches out to me and it takes me a while to write back, it's because when I write, I want to be really with you if I write back. And when I write back, like I want to be focused fully there, more. So I think that's just how it works for me. Um,
Yep.
but it like I said, it is different for different people, and it doesn't have to be a problem. If it's not making you, if it's giving you joy and connection, then there's nothing wrong with it. And it's just more kind of a matter of figuring out what works for you, and like saying yes to you, because I know that like some of the later even like watchtowers or things that I've seen where they're like also are going to make you feel guilty about being on social media or what, this kind of thing. So like really the thing is like just saying yes to whatever actually feels good for you.
So you mentioned art. What sort of art do you like to paint? What's your painting style?
My painting style, you can see if anybody would like to see, or I can send you a link.
Yep, please do.
My website is at laurelspringelmeyer.com, but since my name is so complicated to spell, Springelmeyer is very long. It's at bigscreamart.ca.
Okay.
So it's like Little Scream is the music and Big Scream is the art. Big Scream Art, but they're like dreamy kind of paintings, like
Nice.
sort of like very like a bit surreal, but like just mostly like dreamy kind of. Their painting is quite therapeutic for me and unconscious, and I think that there are definitely. It's really interesting when I first moved to Montreal, actually, and was doing some painting. There was a woman who really got into my paintings right away. We had only met a few times, and we found out that I found out that she had also been raised in a cult, not witnesses, but something else. And so clearly there was something that I wasn't conscious of that was going into my art, and that this, like that she was like, anyways, it must be in there somewhere is what I mean. I don't think of that consciously when I paint, but it's clearly in there somewhere, because some of the people who seem to have responded the most or like bought my work consistent, like more than one piece are like, okay, I get this. I feel your feelings in this. But that's the magical thing about art, and the magical thing about creation is that if you have that, desire to do it, you don't always know why you're doing it or what, what's going to come out in it. And there's just, you can learn a lot about yourself and, just by doing that and opening up to it.
Yep. I'm glad you said your last name, because I wasn't going to murder your name in pronunciation. So just, how do you say your name again?
Springelmeyer. Laurel Springelmeyer.
Where's that come from? Is that your hubby's side or?
Yeah, it's my father's side, and it's
your father's side.
It's like Bavarian German, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said it, not me, because I would have.
No, I couldn't. You should. It's always hilarious when I get, phone calls from,
okay.
They're like, "Hello, is Miss Brandel?" You can just hear them. They don't. I always feel bad for anyone who has to call me without having heard my name.
Yep. I'll just stick with your first name. I think I won't get into trouble with that one.
That's fine. That's totally fine. Yeah.
So music and art sound like a big part of your life. Do you have any other interests that you enjoy doing on the side, if you've got time, that is?
I love reading, and I love
what style of book do you like?
It's a good question. I like, there's certain nonfiction that I love.
Okay.
Annie Dillard is one of my favorite authors, and she does a lot of like nonfiction stuff, but it feels like fiction almost. It's just so flowy.
Yeah.
And I do love certain types of, like, I guess, speculative fiction, which is maybe a bit sci-fi, but like right now I'm reading, talking about this whole like apocalyptic future narrative.
Yep.
I'm reading Kim Stanley Robinson, a book called Ministry for the Future, and it's actually giving me so much hope for the future. It's cool. It's just sort of like it's just very pragmatic. It's called science fiction, but it's just, he's just thinking about what the world is like right now and trying to think through, okay, how are we going to work ourselves out of this, and work together and figure it out. So I love that. I love Margaret Atwood. She's a Canadian author who I think many people know her from The Handmaid's Tale, which has now been made into, a very popular TV show about restrictive religious orders. And yeah, so books like that. I do love literature. And yeah, I think I love a lot of things, and I am never bored.
Great.
Never bored.
I don't think you've got time to be bored, do you?
That's the thing. Like there's always a book I want to read, always a
Yeah,
a
yeah,
painting I want to paint, and that's and I will say this. Like right now I'm feeling really great, and I'm talking about all the things I love. I've definitely struggled with depression, which has been, I think, a
okay,
part of that experience too, that's like come and gone for me. And that's,
yeah, yeah,
when I every once in a while when that arises for me, I have to, work through it, and I don't have the same kind of energy, where
yes, yeah,
so it's not, I just wanted to put that out there. There's not always like rosy,
nope,
everything's amazing. I'm like doing this all the time, um, but in general, I would say in the big picture, when I'm not figuring my way through
yeah,
depression or any of that those kind of regular ups and downs, that yeah, that I just really appreciate being able to say yes to so many things, and you know,
great, great. So once you get the project out of the way with your hubby, two
yeah,
years or so,
yeah.
you got any long-term goals that you'd like to reach out to or reach to?
That's a really interesting question, and it's something that I've been thinking about
Mm,
a lot. And I think like the short answer is I've just been so fortunate to be able to
yeah,
do what I've done, and I worked really hard. I worked for a decade. I worked like multiple jobs, tried to save up enough money for myself to be able to start working on some art
yep,
projects and things.
yep,
And now, you know, I've got things going and I'm able to like make things work just by making art. So for the
yeah,
most part, and I do, like, I work for other people. I'll sing on other people's albums. I do, like I do get other work that way, but it's mostly in, now it's at this point in my life, it's mostly in the creative sector. And it took me a long time to get here and to be able to do that. So just like one answer is just being able to keep doing this is a blessing, and I'm just really grateful
yep,
for it. And if I can keep doing this for as long as I can, and hopefully make things that reach people, that
yep,
help
yeah,
people, that give people comfort,
yep,
then I'm really happy. That would make me really, really happy. So that's the general one. And then inside of that, like, sure, like there's some like writing project, this kind of like, other sort of like art, multimedia things, like bigger, more ambitious things that I would like to work on. But really the short answer is just to be able to keep doing what I've been able to, you know, keep doing what I've been able
nice,
to be doing, because it's really awesome.
nice. That's so great to hear. So, if somebody was in a similar position to you, say in their 20s, going through the yes, no, should I or shouldn't I, what bit of encouragement would you give?
Mhm.
Well, not even if they're in their 20s, wherever they
Yeah.
are in age and they're going
Mhm.
through that sort of thing that you went through, what bit of encouragement would you give to them?
I would say it's normal that it's hard. It's normal that it's hard to change these things. It's normal that it's hard to walk away from these relationships,
Yeah.
and you're not alone. And if you just give yourself the space to keep walking forwards, to keep moving through where you're at, you will absolutely get to a place where you have friends that care about you no matter what you do, where you have people that support and love you, and where you're able to not feel like you're in conflict all the time with yourself in the same way
Mm,
for the same
mm,
reasons, um, and that there absolutely are better things out there for you, and that you don't have to be afraid of all of the things that you've been told to be afraid of, and um, yeah, just don't be hard on yourself if it's hard, because it's a really, really hard thing to go through. um, yeah, and just keep going. It's worth it. It's worth it to
it
keep
is.
going, and you will find better things than you could even imagine for yourself probably right now.
And all because you said
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Say yes to you. Say yes to you, and saying yes to you doesn't mean that you're a bad, selfish person, and it doesn't mean that you're gonna be a jerk to
Yeah.
people, and it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that you stop having the good values that you wanna keep of any of that stuff. It doesn't, it's like, it's it's just embracing embracing the gift of life that you've been given, you know? And like, it's so the further you'll get away from the organization, the more like, the more you'll realize like there's more to all of this. There's more to,
Yeah.
you know, the
Yeah.
nature of reality than some small organization based in, you know, based in New York State that was like created by a guy, you know, in the 1800s who was like having questions, you know, like it's the further you get away from it, the more perspective you can get, the more you'll
Yes.
realize like it's just, yeah, the further you get away from it, the bigger your life can become and the bigger your embrace of what, you know, what your life
Yeah.
means can become, you know. And you also, you know, some people go real hardcore atheist and that's what works for them and they're like, that's what I want. Other people go other ways and you can find, you can also reclaim that for yourself and
Yep.
still, you know, not have to feel like a bad person in any way. You know, you can still
Yep.
talk to God all you want and pray all you want or whatever, you know, and no longer have that feeling that like someone else is controlling that or that you're not doing it the right way or that, you know, like there's just so much that you can free yourself of, you know, and there, whatever your way is right for you is what's right for you.
Absolutely agree.
Hmm. So
Well, I do want to say thank you for being on our live stream today. It's been nice to see the authentic self that you
yeah,
now have.
yeah,
So well done for all the hard work you've done.
thank
We look
you.
forward to seeing some of the projects that Little Scream and Big Scream and
Yeah,
anything else that might be screaming out nice and loud or quietly comes along. And thank you for sharing some of your personal details as well.
yeah, yeah,
It
I
gives us
like I
hope.
said, yeah, I just want to give a hug to everybody who's out there and, you know, just know that you're not alone and you'll get through
Yeah,
this. There's so much more to come.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you for being here. For those ones who are watching now and who may watch a little bit later on, if you do want to reach out to Laurel, please leave a comment in the video and she'll get back to you when she's able to. And until then, we look forward to seeing everybody again on our next live stream, which is certainly going to be another fun opportunity to see what we can do to move on and enjoy our lives. Until then, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your comments, and we look forward to seeing you again. Look after yourselves, keep smiling, and keep safe. Bye for now.
Bye.